Hi guys, this video is going to be about hand painting textures. So this is the kind of final result of this. So I'm just going to go through how I painted this dagger. So I wouldn't say I'm not an expert on this. This is just kind of how I do it. I'm sure other people have got other techniques that might work better, but the results from this are kind of okay, so I'll show you how I did it. So just a really quick overview of this. This was my so this is obviously the final texture here on the kind of right of this screen. This is how I started off. So I think the thing with hand painting, the thing that I find with hand painting is that you just have to start doing things. You just kind of have to make a start on it, and it's just kind of time consuming, and you just have to slowly build up the textures until they look good. So something like this won't take very long to paint at all, and it's just getting some of the very, very basic lighting in. Obviously there's no kind of blending in this really. It doesn't look good at all, but it's at least it's a start. So I like to paint the whole thing to start with, do kind of a quick draft of the whole thing, and I know some people just go in and start painting, but I think maybe, you know, as you get kind of more skilled at doing this, you can just go in and just kind of paint the whole thing in final detail from start to finish. But for me, I prefer to kind of build it up in layers. So I started off with that, and then my next pass was to kind of start to add in a little bit more detail and kind of starting to blend a lot of the colours together. And then the next step is to carry on adding more detail, start to put some scratches in and some kind of fine detail. You can see that I've refined the colours a lot from this pass to this one. So with hand painted textures, you want to make them really kind of pop a lot. Often they're oversaturated. You can see there's a lot of greens and blues in this metal here, which you wouldn't necessarily get so much of if you were texturing realistically. The other thing with this is that when you kind of do realistic textures, you tend to not paint in light and shadow. But when you're doing hand painted textures, you have to paint in your lights and your shadows, because that's just what it gives it that hand painted look. So you can see, you know, on these scratches, they wouldn't work if I hadn't painted a dark side and a light side. With a realistic texture, you'd probably do this with a normal map, and you'd let the game engine use the spec to actually give you that detail. So the final step was just to kind of pad this a bit, and to, again, a tiny bit of refining colours and just neatening it up and basically turning it into a final texture. So I can show you the texture in Marmoset. So this is how it kind of turned out. I think it turned out okay. I'm not incredibly happy with my wood, but from a distance I think it gives the look that I wanted. I just wanted kind of a really tangly look to it. So this is the model that I started off with. So I'm not going to go through how to model this at all. There's other tutorials that you can follow to go through how to model something, but I've started off with a fairly simple model. I've mirrored the UVs on both sides of this, so I'm just going to paint one side, and just quickly going over the way that I've unwrapped this. I've just made sure that basically that my textures are facing upwards on the unwrap, when we paint in the light and shadow on this is going to make it a bit easier, because what I would normally do is just imagine that a light source is straight above the object. So if I was doing something like a sword or a dagger, I'd imagine that that dagger was kind of being held completely upright, so that the tip here was pointing up towards the sky. So then we can just paint in our lights on this, kind of pointing straight down this way, and it makes it a bit easier. Obviously it doesn't necessarily matter, it's easier to paint the texture if the light is always coming from one direction, rather than, you know, if this was kind of flipped upside down like that, then I just have to paint the light coming from the bottom upwards, and then the light here coming from the top downwards. So it just makes it easier if it's all consistent. So that's the setup. So then all I've done here is just set up a simple Photoshop file, delete those, with my UVs overlaid, and I've just picked a kind of neutral colour to go underneath. So I can make a new layer now, and then I can start painting.